Oswald is our current president from over the western side of the state. But I want to thank you all for your past support. We're still struggling in Missouri. We had a gap, and we've let some of the opposition come in really deep in Missouri, and it's been a challenge to have us get off the ground. But we want to be strong and keep moving forward. As a legislator, to give you a background of that work. In the 90s, we were working with Wellstone and the Farmers Union and others, and we were trying to pass putting pressure on Congress to pass restrictions on packer ownership of livestock. We were trying to strengthen the GIPSA rules. At that time, we were actually motivating ourselves to line up to get in the Farm Bill. I don't know if you all, I know most of you all probably remember that fight back in the late 90s. We finally got there, right? And then country of origin labeling. I passed the legislation in Missouri as a state senator that created a statewide COOL, country of origin labeling. We banned packer ownership of livestock in Missouri in that bill, and we gave the state attorney general the ability to enforce the GIPSA rules. Unfortunately, the Cattlemen's Association decided they didn't like that very well, filed litigation against us. Spent 4 years going to the Supreme Court to prove it was a constitutional bill, but it had a 5-year authorization by the time we got it out of the courts. There was only a year left and wasn't time to write the rules. When I was in the legislature, that's what I fought for. I ran for lieutenant governor of Missouri. I, at the time, thought I was going to go ahead and run for governor. My wife became ill, and I chose to leave office in 2005. I didn't run for re-election in 2004. Went home to raise a couple of girls. I've got a Megan and a Shannon. And Meg's 5th year, graduated with a master's out of the University of Missouri. And Shannon's getting ready to go into college, so we're pretty excited as a family. This is her senior year in high school, so they've been a great family. My wife does better. She has an autoimmune issue, will never be well, but we've done very well as a family and worked very hard on our family farm. Our farm is one of the traditional homesteads. You all know the story. I always like visiting with folks, and we kind of shared before things started. And I know some of your all's backgrounds, and I'm kind of outnumbered by one family here, by maybe 5,000 folks. But my grandma and grandpa, when they were married, 1 year later, the farmhouse burnt down. Now, it burnt down with a lantern and a curtain. Now, Grandma swears it was an accident. The family has always believed Grandma wanted a new home. Well, Grandpa built her that new home in 1919. And on the farmstead that my great-grandfather bought and began farming on. So my dad was born in the living room of that home. My granddad passed away in the dining room of cancer in a hospital bed. My family moved in to care for him. That then became my home. My dad died within 10 feet of where he was born in that same home, and my brother now calls that house his home. We have a homestead. My family is rooted in the heritage of this country and in American agriculture. That's one reason I'm so proud to be a Farmers Union member. I'm proud to be a member of the Organization for Competitive Markets, OCM. I'm proud to be here today to kind of share with you, as you heard from my introduction, I've done a lot of grassroots organizing. How do we get organized? What I want to talk a little bit about is the post-Farm Bill. Now, I'm sure others would maybe talk about what's in the current Farm Bill and how that's going to shake out. But I'm here going to talk a little bit about how do we think about the next round? Will there be a next round? I want us to focus a little bit on how we get there. I'm going to put up a couple of slides, and then I'm going to give us kind of a history lesson. I'm a fan of history. I think from the past we can learn for the future, right? I don't think it's always exactly the same, but it sure holds a lot of things. There's no sense recreating the wheel. As a matter of fact, we've been around so long that there's really nothing new. And we really need to look at the past and figure out how we can therefore go into the future. I went to the United States Army, came out of high school in 75, filed my first income tax as a farmer in 1978. So that year is very important to me. So I kind of track everything based upon how long I've been farming. Or sometimes I say trying to farm. Because I came about just at the wrong time in agriculture to stay on the land. But we're still there, struggling and fighting. My brother and I belong to a pig co-op. And we raise pigs with another group of farmers. We market about 1,100 head of pigs a week. About 115 of us. I run about anywhere from I have 373 sows on the ground now, but I run anywhere from 360 to 400 sows. And we market into the Chipotles, the Whole Foods, into Manhattan. We are the choice pork of the New York City Chefs Association. So we're very proud of high quality pork that we raise. That's one reason I've got to get home, because my cousins in Arkansas with those Razorbacks just can't raise pork, I'll tell you. There's no I kid them about that all the time. But 78 is an important time for me. This slide just speaks volumes. Tom Vilsack, in July of 2010, I think it was July of 2010, in the opening hearings on what is now the current Farm Bill, I think it'll be the current Farm Bill, announced that over the last 40 years or so, 30 to 40 years, we had lost 1 million of America's family farmers. He asked the Senate committee, why is it that we can't think about how to at least put maybe 100,000 of them back on the land? I'll tell you, all the ideas that he presented, most all of them died somewhere in this process that just would not end, that gave us a farm bill. I want you to just keep that in mind. I'm going to get back to that slide. Now, I'm a pig farmer. As we lost those farmers, this is the way we began to farm. Kind of looks like a Walmart parking lot. Everybody parked in a row. And when they opened at midnight on Thanksgiving evening or whatever the heck it was, that was insanity. I'm not a fan of Walmart, though. So, kind of reminds me of that. I want to take you back a little bit. Like I told you, from the past, we can learn for the future. This is back several years. Just want you to think. Carnegie, Rockefeller, names in American history, people that consolidated the wealth, created the big trust, whiskey trust, tobacco trust, Packer trust. So they couldn't form corporations at that time. The law didn't allow it. They created trusts. They swapped out interest in trusts, just like you might have an irrevocable trust to help you with your estate planning. It was just a trust. Those were legal. Corporations had to be formed by going to Congress, or some legislators had the power for state corporations, but they could form a trust. They were called the trust. The Big Four, in 1888, first federal investigation against the meatpacking company, they controlled 45% of the U.S. slaughter. Some names you still recognize today. Teddy Roosevelt, trust buster. Remember? Governor of New York said he was going to bust the trust. Became vice president. McKinley gets assassinated. Teddy becomes president of the United States. Now this book, when I was forced to read it, when I was in school, had very little meaning. Later in life, I realized this book had a heck of a lot of meaning to my life as a farmer. This is what Upton Sinclair said in The Jungle. In the national capital, that would be Washington, D.C., the Meatpacking Trust, that would be the American Meat Institute today, had power to prevent inspection of its product and to falsify government reports. In the commercial world, it wiped out thousands of businesses every year. First investigation, Big Four have 45% control of the market space. Upton Sinclair writes the book in 1906. Things began to happen in Congress to bust up the trust because they controlled so much of the U.S. food system and were driving farmers and processors out of business. The country rose up and supported in 1890 the Sherman Act, 1914 the Clayton Act, and 1920 was the biggest success that happened for us. In a settlement of a major lawsuit to bust up the trust, there was an agreement that the Big Four had to have divestiture. In other words, they had to break themselves up. They couldn't have any contract and restraint of trade, owning an interest in any stockyard or any market journal, having an interest in manufacturing food products not related to meat packing. At that time, 30% of the U.S. were American farmers. And that 30% had a voice loud enough to get those things done. 1921 Packers and Stockyard Act. Of course, I won't go into detail. Shortly thereafter, the courts ruled that the language was too vague, so the enforcement was impossible. We have still been fighting that fight today in this darn farm bill to get that law, 1921 Packers and Stockyard Act, the predatory practices section, the anti-competition sections to be enforced in this country. Look at the success. By 1977, 1 year prior to my coming out of the military to go farming, they only controlled 20% of the U.S. market space. The hope and future of Joe and Steve Maxwell, my twin brother Steve, he's the real farmer. You know, if he was here, he would quickly tell you this story. I was running for office one day. I was running for lieutenant governor. The little film people, the people I'd hired to put it all together said, "We don't have enough pictures of you on the farm. We've got to get by your farm. What can we do?" I said, "Well, I had this whole wardrobe. They make you get all these shots in the same day. They make you change clothes 5 times. It's the same darn day." But anyway, I said, "Well, I didn't bring any clothes to the farm. It wasn't on the deal." So they pull up. And my brother's combining wheat in summertime. They said, "Take your shirt off." My brother takes off his shirt, gives me his farm hat, and they shot me pictures this high up on his or our combine. He was the one driving it. So my brother tell you they had to give the shirt off his back for me to get elected lieutenant governor. And he ain't lying. But we started farming in 1978. Now we all know growing up on the farm, you began the day you was old enough to walk, but you know, I filed income taxes, so that's just kind of a time period that I hold. We had won. 30% of the U.S. farmers, or the U.S. was farmers, and we'd been able to push through and drive through the policies necessary for us to break up the trust that was created in the 1880s and 90s. The Rockefeller Party, the other two big boys. American people, American farmers, found the power, found the constituencies, built the coalitions, found it of all things that I named governor from New York. East Coast guy, took break them up. That's history. That's history. A long fight. 125 years. It was about 100 years getting to 20%. Giving hope to young people like myself and my brother that there was a future in agriculture, tilling the soil, being a good steward of the land and the animals. 1981. Under the Ronald Reagan, this will be bipartisan. I'll get to Clinton in a minute. I don't want anybody to boo me in. I give this to the Farm Bureau. I get booed there a lot more in the beginning than I do at the Farmers Union. 1981, Ronald Reagan and his team, with executive orders and other ways, lifted the 1920 decree. Remember that decree everybody agreed to? I showed you that broke them up, told them that they couldn't own everything. 3 years after I started farming, Ronald Reagan set in motion the demise of the American farmer as I knew it in 1978. Ronald Reagan's administration hired economists and lawyers. A lot of them came out of the University of Chicago. Nothing against the University of Chicago. It's a great university. That's why they won. Mitt Romney was graduating when the Harvard folks decided they would change the thinking on this, by the way. I mean, it was not just University of Chicago. It was a big thinking. This is when we decided we were going to feed the world. To do that, you had to change the definition of the marketplace in the Clayton Act and the Sherman Act. I was driving the ugliest orange GMC pickup you ever saw the day I heard that the Reagan administration had been successful in going to the efficiency model over the anti-competitive model in the Sherman Act. I pulled over. I was driving I-70, heading to Kansas City to a meeting. I bought that ugly orange truck because it was the cheapest one on the lot. And I was beginning farming. It was a good pickup. It was ugly. I don't know. It was ugly. It was cheap, but it was ugly. And I pulled over and a tear came in my eye. I thought there's probably very few of us that know what just happened to the agriculture and farming that I love. Because you understand, if the courts are now destined to determine, to make the definition of antitrust, that it is efficient, the efficiency of the merger and acquisition, that if it increases efficiency within the marketplace, it will better the consumers, is what the court said. It will help the consumers. So we want it more efficient market. In a capitalist system, and I'm a great capitalist, I own a couple of companies, a farm, my wife owns a business, I'm good on capitalism, but in the end there's just one of us sons of bucks left. We eat everybody else unless there's some balancing. That's why we had the Sherman Act. That's why we busted up. Why Teddy Roosevelt was a trust buster. Because in the end, there's only one, and that's bad. It's bad for consumers. It's bad for us in agriculture. Efficiency model. The conglomerate mergers are allowed in the name of efficiency. Reagan also reduced the budgets of the FTC and Department of Justice, so nobody was really watching the hen house anymore. By 1984 and 85, the history saw the largest numbers of mergers and acquisitions that this country has ever seen before, has ever seen since. The trusts were back. Some of them are the same darn families. Did you notice the names on the board back when Upton Sinclair wrote his book in 1906? Did you recognize a couple of those names? They're still here. They were working the halls all those years to get another chance. Clinton. Bipartisan speech. So Ronald Reagan decides he'll take on, bleed into the economic theory of that you had to change the marketplace definition because you needed to have this new growth and stimulation and consolidation of capital if you were really going to have an efficient model, and also that we wanted to feed the world. That's what it became. There's a lot of other characters that played a part. Secretaries of Agriculture that won this plant intro and intro. This is, I give a whole series of classes on this. So I'm just pointing to the highlights, but along comes Clinton. The final act that unwound the New Deal was by Bill Clinton and his administration. Started with some of Reagan's acts. Nixon began some of it when he opened up trade with China and Russia. The Banking Act of 1994, and the biggest one was the reversal of Glass-Steagall. Glass-Steagall, under the New Deal, FDR's New Deal, they said, you know, one of the problems that we had and why we all went down the tank in the Great Depression is that the banks had too much latitude and invested in too high a risk. And they consolidated the wealth, and then when they crashed, the whole world came down. So coming out of that period, Glass-Steagall was passed, and it told the banks, there's only certain things certain banks can do. You can be licensed for this, or you can be licensed for that, but we're not going to allow this huge consolidation. The head of Citicorp already cut a deal that violated Glass-Steagall and needed to get it corrected because it was worth billions of dollars and went to the Clinton administration. As a matter of fact, the head of Citicorp, according to the records of President Clinton, the day of and the day after was on the phone several times with the President of the United States to get this overturned. This is what candidate Obama said about Clinton's act. So this keeps it in the family, if you will. By the time the Glass-Steagall Act was repealed in 1999, the $300 million lobbying effort that drove deregulation was more about facilitating mergers, kind of the same thing that Mr. Reagan did, than creating an efficient regulatory framework, Mr. Obama said in his speech. He was a candidate at the time, President, on the economy at Cooper Union in New York in March 2008. Instead of establishing a 21st century regulatory framework, we simply dismantled the old one, thereby encouraging a winner-take-all, anything-goes environment that helped foster devastating dislocations in our economy. Policy changes. Policy changes in our state capital. What do we get from this return back to the big trust? Severe concentration of the markets, farmers off the land, animals in extreme confinement, businesses and wealth driven out of our rural communities, and our environment pays the price. This is today. 45%, and we were screaming in 1906 when Upton Sinclair wrote the book The Jungle. This is today. There's nobody at 45% because they're all above it. According to the economists, anything above 45% is highly concentrated. Abuses are likely. But when you get to 55% or 58% or 83% or 93% or 80%, it's not likely that abuses will occur. It is certain that abuses will occur. This is the concentration in agriculture today. 4 largest companies in each industry. I got a little side note down there about Monsanto because I'm not real big. I'm from Missouri, and I always like to mention how good they are. This is what it looks like